We begin this morning with President Trump back from his working vacation with a vengeance. In a new and truly stunning attack on his former White House aide and former primetime co-star Omarosa Newman, this is what the president just wrote. Quote, "When you give a crazed, crying lowlife a break and give her a job at the White House, I guess it just didn't work out. Good work by General Kelly for quickly firing that dog." Now, Newman's tell-all White House memoir is on bookstore shelves now as we speak, releasing today. But what appears to have especially incensed the president are her repeated claims that he used the N-word during at least one taping of The Apprentice. Last night, the president wrote in part, "I don't have that word in my vocabulary, never have. She made it up." And it's important to note this alleged tape has not surfaced, so for now it is her word against his word on this. Also this morning, a fresh attack on his own attorney general. Referring to the special counsel probe, the president writes, quote, "If we had a real attorney general, this witch hunt would never have been started." Let's go to Abby Phillips. She is back at the White House after covering the president in Bedminster and joins me now. So, Abby, we'll get to Sessions in a moment, but let's just begin with this escalation of the feud with Omarosa. The White House beyond irked by this.
That's right. And the president really being the one to lead the charge in the pushback. The president had been silent on Omarosa for so long. I think a lot of people wondered when he would finally push back, and now he has. And he's centered on this issue of an alleged tape of him using the N-word during a filming of The Apprentice. And he said last night he spoke to Mark Burnett, the creator of that show, who said that no such tapes exist. And he said Omarosa used to say such wonderful things about him, and now she's clearly not as a result of this book. But this has become a real problem for the White House, in part because Omarosa keeps talking not only about these bombshell allegations, but keeps talking about the tapes that she allegedly has. She released yet another one this morning, and the president after that tweeted that tweet where he calls her a dog that you mentioned this morning. But last night it was a full court press, not just from the White House, but from the president's allies on the outside, including Katrina Pearson, who is in Omarosa's book. Omarosa alleges that Katrina talks about this tape in a conference call, and this is how Katrina denies those allegations.
That is absolutely not true. I have no sources with that tape. I have no connections to anyone at Celebrity Apprentice other than Omarosa. And in fact, she was the only one that brought this tape up.
So again, Poppy, Omarosa claims that she has tapes that bolster her side of this story. The question will be who to believe in all of this, and clearly none of it is going away. This book tour is just getting underway. The book is out today, and Omarosa is continuing with her media appearances this week.
So, Abby, the president's really fighting on two fronts, right? He's fighting this he said, she said battle with Omarosa. And then he's continuing to fight with his own attorney general, Jeff Sessions. A big attack yesterday. This morning, he says we need a real attorney general, once again slamming Jeff Sessions. Why?
Yeah, this morning, the president, with a series of tweets about the Russia investigation, but he won't lay off of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, saying that if we had a real attorney general, this witch hunt would never have been started. Look, this continues to be part of a crusade on the president's part to undermine this probe, but he is not over this issue of Attorney General Jeff Sessions recusing himself from the probe. He keeps talking about it day after day. But we have to remember in all of this, he appointed Sessions. Sessions is one of his biggest supporters. That's not going to change. And according to the president, he thinks he has the authority to remove him, but he hasn't yet, Poppy. You have to wonder why.
The first sitting senator to endorse President Trump, help him throughout the campaign, and now the president clearly not pleased at all with the job he's doing. Abby, thank you. Bring us the latest when you have it from the White House. Let's talk about all of these headlines. NPR White House reporter Aisha Rasco is with me. Also, former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig and CNN political analyst and New York Times correspondent Alex Burns. So let's talk, Aisha, first about, the words that the president used this morning to describe Omarosa. He called her a dog, and that is clearly an attempt to make her seem less than human. And he does this at the same time that he is trying to discredit her claims that he, according to her, allegedly used the N-word way back in the day on the taping of The Apprentice. You can't ignore race here, right? I mean, this country has a history of trying to make black people less than human, right? And then the president does that this morning with the word dog. What's your read?
It is to try to defend yourself, saying that you didn't use a racial slur. Well, we don't know whether there are any tapes or whether President Trump used that racial slur, but we do know in black and white that he did call his former staffer, who he hired, a dog. And I don't think that anyone would want their mother, their sister, them, to be called a dog. And then when you add into the fact that this is a black woman, and this is not the latest time that President Trump has done this. This is not the only time President Trump has done this, made these kind of derogatory remarks about prominent black figures. He questioned the intelligence of LeBron James. He does the same thing with Don Lemon and others. So this seems to be a part of a pattern for the president.
He did the same thing with Maxine Waters, a sitting member of Congress, calling her low IQ. Alex, just about the context here, right? Because the president may respond to the criticism he's getting this morning on the use of that word dog, and he may say, I've called a lot of people dogs, right? And we looked up the tweets. He tweeted about Mitt Romney, called him a dog, Ted Cruz at one point, Chuck Todd, the host of Meet the Press, at one point. But you can't ignore the history here, right? From what he said about the Central Park Five to birtherism to the S-hole countries. I mean, this is part of a much bigger picture.
No, it's a neon pattern. It's very, very obvious. And at the risk of sort of parsing his tweets a little bit too carefully here, there are a lot of people who he said were behaving like a dog.
You're right.
Right?
You're
but
right.
there are not a lot of people who he has said this person is a dog.
That is a very good point. I noticed that in reading through all of these tweets when he referred to Mitt Romney, Ted Cruz, et cetera. It was worded differently.
Begging behavior, right?
Yes.
Begging like a dog, right? Or fired like a dog, which is a little bit stranger and not as clear what he's describing in terms of dog-like behavior, but in any case, he's not talking about people as animals, right? And back to back with that word lowlife, it's just unbelievably harsh, and it does fit with this pattern that we've been discussing that has really, it seems, intensified over the last few weeks. It's very, very public, very, very unsubtle. He now uses that description of Maxine Waters as a low IQ individual at campaign rallies. It's a huge applause line for him, and he clearly delights in saying it.
Now, to be clear here, she has been slamming the president as well, right? And she has been talking about the use of the N-word, which she says she's heard. We haven't heard the tape. She has been blasting him, saying he's mentally not fit to be president, but he really took it to a whole new level this morning.
And this is part of the pattern that you've seen with the president all along, is that if anybody criticizes him in any way, he uses that as justification to attack them in just the most heated, over-the-line personal terms.
So, Ellie, to you, on the legal front, Omarosa is giving a series of interviews. Obviously, he wants to sell books. And in one interview last night on MSNBC on Hardball, she had this to say. It got us talking. Let's listen.
If his office calls again,
would you be a
anything
good witness?
I'll share anything that they want. I will certainly corroborate.
Okay, she's talking about Mueller's office and the special counsel probe, and you heard her there say, "If he calls again." So that made us wonder, well, has he called? Has she spoken to him? And we don't know. But do you see Mueller sort of clamoring to flip Omarosa or needing to talk to her? Because she seems to me and strikes me as a kind of prosecution witness that defense attorneys might dream of.
Yeah, I'm not sure Mueller's trying to flip her per se, but if you're in Mueller's position, you want to speak to everybody and anybody. And if a person has relevant information, then you enlist them as a witness. But I think you're right. I think
the credibility issue.
I think she'd be a problematic witness. I've put on some problematic witnesses. I've put on worse witnesses, certainly by far, than Omarosa in terms of prior criminal conduct, but credibility is another matter. She's been all over the map. She has motives and incentives which are just being exacerbated now with this conflict going on with Trump, this very public feud. So she'd be a tough witness to put on the stand and to defend the credibility.
Aisha, these non-disclosure agreements, right? Omarosa claimed that she was offered one by the White House for $15,000 to basically, stay on but not do anything and just stay quiet. And the president confirmed in his tweet yesterday that there are these non-disclosure agreements. He wrote, Wacky Omarosa already has a fully signed non-disclosure agreement. She says she doesn't. But bigger picture here, is it normal for a White House to have staffers sign any sort of NDA?
To my understanding, it's not normal to have just West Wing staff sign non-disclosure agreements, and part of the issue is that legally, when you work at the White House, you're not necessarily working for the president, you're working for the public, you're a
Right.
government official. There are things that you cannot reveal, national security secrets, and if you have clearance, there are issues with that. But just to say that you can't talk about things that happened in the White House that don't have to do with national security and just kind of the goings on, that is unusual. And I think many legal experts say that it's not enforceable.
So, Alex, I mean, what does it tell you about the working environment, the process, the expectations in this West Wing?
Well, I think we can tie together this non-disclosure agreement issue with what the president has been saying about Attorney General Sessions, that he doesn't really distinguish between the responsibilities of his appointees to the government and their responsibilities to him personally, right? That he views the sort of expectations of secrecy and confidentiality that are incumbent upon executive branch staffers as not necessarily the controlling factors in their employment, right? That they have to be loyal and discreet about his priorities and his information. With Jeff Sessions, it's been reported, starting with the Times, but by many people now, that he sees Jeff Sessions as sort of an inferior lawyer to Roy Cohn because he's not protecting him personally.
Where's my Roy Cohn?
Right, that he puts himself at the center of the government in a way that doesn't really reflect the legal realities of the executive branch.
Ellie, what would you do if you were Jeff Sessions? I mean, how does he go to work every day?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that any attorney general has ever been attacked, demeaned, anywhere near this by the president.
They haven't in this way.
Right. I mean, it's not even close. I will say this. I guess there's reason to be grateful that Jeff Sessions is withstanding this storm, because if he were to do what the president wants him to do and resign, I think what happens next is the president puts in his hand-selected person who would not be recused off the Russia investigation, who would take it back over from Rod Rosenstein and perhaps do the president's bidding from there.